Evan had always believed that sleeping after reading a novel was harmless. Apparently, he was wrong. The last thing he remembered was lying on his bed with his phone in one hand, complaining about the ending of an ancient romance novel. The author seriously killed the Duke? What a waste of a perfectly good character. Then he fell asleep. When Evan opened his eyes again, the first thing he noticed was the ceiling. It wasn't his ceiling. There were beautiful wooden carvings above him, golden curtains around the bed, and an enormous room that looked like it belonged in a historical drama. Evan slowly sat up. What? He looked down. He was wearing a long white robe. What? He jumped out of bed and immediately tripped over the robe. Before he could recover, the bedroom doors opened. Several servants hurried inside. Their faces went pale. My lord, you're awake. Evan stared at them. My what? The servants exchanged confused looks. Then one of them smiled nervously. My lord, His Grace has been waiting for you. His Grace. A deep voice came from behind them. Leave us. Every servant immediately bowed and disappeared. Evan turned around. A tall man stood at the doorway. He wore a black military-style coat decorated with silver embroidery. His dark hair was neatly tied back, and his expression was so cold that Evan suddenly forgot how to breathe. The man walked toward him. Evan took one step backward. The stranger stopped directly in front of him. You're awake. Evan swallowed. Who are you? The man's expression barely changed. Your husband. Silence. Evan blinked. Once. Twice. Then he pointed at himself. My what? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Your husband. Evan stared at him in complete horror. He had been asleep for one night. And somehow, he had gotten married. Evan stared at the man in front of him. Then he looked at the servants who were waiting outside. Then back at the man. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that? The man calmly replied. I am your husband. Evan's mouth fell open. No, that's impossible. The man's eyebrow lifted slightly. Why? Because I don't even know you. You knew me yesterday. I did not. The man was silent for a moment. Then he looked toward the servants. Is he still ill? One servant immediately bowed. Yes, Your Grace. Perhaps his memory has been affected. Evan's eyes widened. Wait. Who are you? The man finally introduced himself. Cassian Valen. Duke of Valen. Evan froze. That name. He knew that name. His heart began pounding. Cassian Valen was the Duke from the novel he had been reading last night. The cold, feared Duke. The man who was eventually betrayed by the royal family. The man who became the villain of the story. And most importantly, the man who was supposed to die alone. Evan slowly whispered, This can't be real. Cassian stepped closer. What did you say? Nothing. Evan forced a smile. Your Grace. Cassian studied him suspiciously. You called me that yesterday. Of course I did. Evan nodded rapidly. Very respectful. Very normal. I definitely remember everything. Cassian's expression remained unreadable. You don't. It wasn't a question. Evan looked away. Maybe I hit my head. Cassian sighed quietly. Then, to Evan's complete shock, he reached out and gently adjusted the collar of Evan's robe. Then rest. Evan stared at him. The terrifying Duke had just fixed his clothes like it was the most natural thing in the world. Cassian turned toward the door. Evan suddenly remembered something. Wait. Cassian stopped. Evan took a deep breath. I want a divorce. The room became completely silent. Cassian slowly turned around. No. Evan blinked. Why? Cassian looked at him as if the answer were enough. Evan spent the next hour trying to understand his situation. Unfortunately, every answer made things worse. Apparently, he was not simply staying at the Duke's estate. He was legally married to Cassian Valen. Apparently, the marriage had happened 3 days ago. Apparently, Evan had personally agreed to it. And apparently, everyone in the household thought the marriage was perfectly normal. Evan sat at the breakfast table, staring at the enormous amount of food in front of him. Why is there so much food? The maid standing nearby smiled. His Grace ordered your favorite dishes. Evan looked at her. My favorite. Yes, my lord. Evan pointed at a bowl. What is that? Your favorite. He pointed at another plate. And that. Also your favorite. Evan slowly lowered his hand. So I apparently have 20 favorite foods. The maid looked confused. You used to. Evan sighed. This world was becoming more ridiculous by the minute. Then the doors opened. Cassian entered. Every servant immediately straightened. Evan watched the Duke sit across from him. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Finally, Evan said, I have a question. Cassian looked up. Asked, "Why did you marry me?" Cassian paused. "You agreed." "That doesn't answer my question." Cassian calmly picked up his cup. "You wanted to marry me." Evan nearly choked on his tea. "I wanted to." "Yes." "Why?" Cassian looked at him. For the first time, something almost resembling amusement appeared in his eyes. "You said I was handsome." Evan froze. The servant beside him suddenly became very interested in the floor. Evan covered his face with both hands. "Oh no." Cassian continued eating as though nothing had happened. Evan slowly looked at him again. "This is officially the most embarrassing day of my life." Cassian's lips curved slightly. "You haven't even seen the palace yet." For Evan decided that if he had truly married Cassian, there had to be some way to undo it. So after breakfast, he marched through the estate looking for someone who could help him. Unfortunately, everyone he asked gave him the same answer. "You should speak with His Grace." Evan groaned. "That man is the problem." The servants immediately looked terrified. Evan lowered his voice. "Sorry. His Grace is a wonderful person." Nobody believed him. Eventually, Evan found himself wandering into a huge library. He stopped. Thousands of books filled the shelves. "This place is incredible." He pulled out the first book he saw. Then another. Then another. Nothing. No information about divorce. No information about transmigration. Not even a book titled, "What to Do When You Wake Up Married to a Duke." Evan sighed. "I need modern civilization." A voice suddenly came from behind him. "Are you looking for something?" Evan nearly threw the book. He turned around. Cassian stood there. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." Evan narrowed his eyes. "That is creepy." Cassian ignored the comment. "You wanted a divorce?" "Yes. I can arrange for the royal court to discuss it." Evan's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yes." Finally, a way home, or at least a way out. But before Evan could celebrate, Cassian added calmly, "After 6 months." Evan's smile disappeared. 6 months. It is required." "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" "You didn't ask." Evan stared at him. "You are unbelievably frustrating." Cassian walked closer. "And yet you married me." "I didn't." Cassian raised an eyebrow. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." For a moment, they simply stared at each other. Then Cassian quietly said, "Perhaps your memory will return." Evan frowned. "And if it doesn't?" Cassian's expression softened slightly. "Then I will make sure you are safe until it does." Evan wasn't prepared for that answer. Evan spent the rest of the morning thinking about Cassian. The Duke was supposed to be a villain. So why had he just promised to protect Evan? Before Evan could find an answer, a servant entered the library. "My lord, His Majesty has invited you and His Grace to the royal palace." Evan looked up. "The palace?" "Yes." His excitement lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then he remembered that he was apparently married to the most feared duke in the empire. "Do I have to go?" "Yes, my lord." "Can I pretend to be sick?" The servant hesitated. "You already did that yesterday." Evan sighed. "Of course I did." A few minutes later, Cassian entered the room. "We leave in an hour." Evan looked at him. "What should I wear?" "Whatever you prefer." Evan stared. "Really?" "Yes." That was the first useful answer Cassian had given him all day. So Evan chose the most comfortable clothes he could find. When he walked downstairs, Cassian looked at him for several seconds. Evan became nervous. "What?" "Nothing." "You're staring. You look different." "Different good or different bad?" Cassian paused. "Good." Evan's ears became warm. "Oh." He quickly looked away. "Let's just go." The journey to the palace was surprisingly quiet. Evan looked through the carriage window at the ancient city. Markets filled the streets. Children ran between shops, merchants shouted prices, and horses pulled wooden carts. It felt unreal. Then the carriage stopped. Evan looked ahead. The royal palace stood beyond enormous golden gates. He swallowed. "Okay." Cassian glanced at him. "Nervous?" "A little." Cassian reached over and quietly took his hand. Evan froze. "Don't worry," Cassian said. "I am here." For some reason, those 4 words made Evan feel safer than they should have. The palace was even more enormous than Evan had imagined. The moment he stepped inside, dozens of nobles turned to look at him. Evan immediately whispered to Cassian, "Why is everyone staring?" "Because you are my husband." "That is not comforting." Cassian almost smiled. They entered the grand hall, where the emperor and empress were waiting. Evan quickly bowed. "Your Majesty." The emperor looked surprised. "You seem different." Evan's heart skipped. Different? Did the emperor know something? Before he could answer, the Emperor smiled. We heard you lost your memory. Yes, Evan said carefully. The Emperor glanced at Cassian. And you don't remember your marriage? Evan nodded. Not at all. A strange silence filled the hall. Then a young prince laughed. How convenient. Evan looked at him. The prince smiled mockingly. Perhaps the Duke's husband simply regrets his choice. Evan frowned. Cassian's expression instantly became cold. Choose your words carefully. The prince's smile disappeared. Evan quietly grabbed Cassian's sleeve. It's fine. Cassian looked down at his hand. For some reason, he didn't pull away. The Emperor cleared his throat. We did not summon you here for an argument. Evan relaxed. Then the Emperor continued. There will be a royal banquet tonight. Evan's stomach dropped. A banquet? Yes. Everyone of importance will attend. Evan looked at Cassian. Do I have to go? Cassian answered immediately. Yes. Evan sighed. Fine. He had no idea that the banquet would be the first time someone tried to uncover the truth about his strange behavior. And he certainly didn't know that one person in the palace already knew exactly who Evan really was. 7 that evening, Evan stood in front of a mirror, wondering how his life had become so ridiculous. Only a few days ago, he had been a normal student. Now he was dressed in expensive ancient clothes and preparing to attend a royal banquet. When he entered the hall, hundreds of people turned toward him. Evan whispered, Why does everyone keep staring at me? Cassian walked beside him. They are curious. About what? You. That makes it worse. Cassian's lips almost curved into a smile. They reached their seats. Evan immediately noticed something strange. The chair beside Cassian was empty. Where am I supposed to sit? Cassian looked at him. Beside me. Evan sat down. A nobleman nearby whispered something to his companion. Evan couldn't hear the words, but he could tell they were talking about him. He leaned toward Cassian. People here gossip a lot. They are afraid to gossip about me. Evan stared at him. That is somehow impressive. Dinner began. Evan tried to behave properly. He really did. Unfortunately, he had no idea which spoon was supposed to be used first. He picked one up. Then another. Then another. Cassian quietly moved the correct spoon closer to him. Evan whispered, Thank you. Cassian nodded. A moment later, Evan accidentally used the wrong fork. He froze. Cassian calmly switched it for him. Again, Evan whispered, How many rules does eating have here? Too many. Finally, something we agree on. Cassian looked at him. For the first time that evening, he actually smiled. Evan forgot what he was saying. The terrifying Duke had a beautiful smile. Before Evan could recover, a noblewoman approached their table. Duke Valen. Cassian looked up. She smiled at Evan. My lord, may I ask you something? Evan nodded. She leaned closer. Why do you behave as though you've never lived in this world before? Evan's smile disappeared. He suddenly realized. Someone was watching him very carefully. Evan didn't know how to answer. The noblewoman continued smiling. You seem different tonight. Evan laughed nervously. Maybe I'm just tired. She didn't look convinced. Before she could ask another question, Cassian spoke. My husband doesn't owe you an explanation. His voice was calm, but there was a warning hidden beneath it. The noblewoman immediately bowed. Of course, Your Grace. She walked away. Evan watched her disappear into the crowd. That was suspicious. Cassian looked at him. You noticed? I'm not completely stupid. I didn't say you were. Evan narrowed his eyes. That sounded like an insult. It wasn't. Good. They continued eating. But Evan couldn't relax. Someone had noticed that he wasn't behaving normally, and that was dangerous. He knew nothing about this world. He didn't know who he could trust. Then a servant approached Cassian and whispered something into his ear. Cassian's expression changed immediately. What happened? Evan asked. We are leaving. Why? Cassian stood. Now. Evan followed him out of the banquet hall. The moment they entered the carriage, Evan asked again. What happened? Cassian looked out the window. Someone entered our residence. Evan's eyes widened. Someone broke in? Yes. Did they steal something? Cassian looked at him. No. Then what were they looking for? There was a long silence. Finally, Cassian answered. They were searching your room. Evan felt a chill. My room? Yes. Why? Cassian's expression became serious. I don't know. Evan stared at him. But deep inside, he already had a terrible feeling. Someone wasn't simply curious about his strange behavior. Someone was trying to discover his secret. And Evan had no idea how long he could hide the truth. 9. The carriage returned to the Duke's estate in complete silence. Evan kept thinking about his room. Someone had searched it. But why? The moment they arrived, Cassian ordered the guards to check the entire estate. Evan followed him. You're taking this very seriously. I always do. You're always serious. Yes. That must be exhausting. Cassian looked at him. Evan smiled innocently. What? Nothing. They reached Evan's room. Everything appeared normal. The bed was untouched. The furniture was in place. But Evan noticed something strange. One of his books was lying on the floor. He picked it up. This wasn't here before. Cassian immediately walked over. What book is it? Evan opened it. Most of the pages were blank. That's weird. He flipped through the book again. Then something fell from between the pages. A small piece of paper. Evan picked it up. There was only one sentence written on it. Do not trust the royal family. Evan's smile disappeared. Cassian took the paper from his hand. Where did you get this? It was inside the book. Cassian studied the handwriting. His expression became colder. You recognize it? Yes. Evan looked at him. Whose is it? Cassian didn't answer immediately. Then he said quietly, My mother's. Evan froze. Your mother? She died 15 years ago. The room suddenly felt much colder. Evan looked at the mysterious note again. If Cassian's mother had written it, then someone had been hiding this message for 15 years. And somehow, Evan had just found it. Cassian folded the paper carefully. We need to find out why. Evan nodded. For the first time since arriving in this world, he wasn't thinking about going home. He wanted answers. And he had a feeling those answers were connected to Cassian. Cassian spent the entire night investigating the mysterious note. Evan, meanwhile, couldn't sleep. He kept staring at the ceiling. Finally, he got out of bed and walked toward Cassian's study. The door was slightly open. Cassian, no answer. Evan peeked inside. Cassian was standing beside a large table covered with old documents. You're still awake? Cassian looked at him. So are you. I couldn't sleep. Cassian studied him for a moment. Come here. Evan walked closer. On the table were old letters, maps, and family records. This is about your mother? Yes. Cassian picked up an old letter. My mother warned my father that someone inside the royal court was planning to destroy our family. Evan frowned. What happened? She disappeared shortly afterward. Evan's expression changed. Disappeared? They claimed she died. But you don't believe that? No. Cassian's voice was unusually quiet. I never found her body. Evan didn't know what to say. For the first time, he understood why Cassian had become so cold. He had spent years believing that the people closest to him had betrayed his family. Evan reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Cassian looked down at their hands. Evan immediately became embarrassed. Sorry. He tried to pull away. Cassian didn't let him. Instead, he held Evan's hand. You don't have to apologize. Evan looked at him. The room became strangely quiet. Then Cassian said, You're the first person I've told this to. Evan's heart skipped. Why me? Cassian looked directly into his eyes. I don't know. Evan smiled awkwardly. Well, I'm glad you told me. For a moment, neither moved. Then Evan's stomach suddenly growled. Very loudly. Cassian blinked. Evan covered his face. I ruined the moment, didn't I? Cassian actually laughed. It was quiet, but real. Evan stared at him. You can laugh. Cassian's smile disappeared. Go to bed. Evan grinned. 11 the next morning, Evan woke up feeling strangely happy. Then he remembered the previous night. Cassian had laughed. The terrifying Duke had actually laughed because of him. Evan smiled to himself. Maybe he's not as scary as everyone says. He got dressed and went downstairs. The breakfast table was already prepared. Cassian was sitting there, reading a report. Evan took his seat. Good morning. Good morning. Evan stared at him. Cassian looked up. What? You answered. Cassian frowned. Should I not have? No. Keep going. This is progress. Cassian returned to his report. Evan began eating. After a few minutes, he noticed Cassian wasn't touching his food. You haven't eaten. I'll eat later. No. Cassian raised an eyebrow. Evan pushed a plate toward him. You need breakfast. I am busy. You can be busy after eating. The servants became completely silent. Nobody had ever spoken to the Duke like that. Cassian looked at the plate, then at Evan. Finally, he picked up his fork. Evan smiled proudly. See? I'm already improving your life. Don't become too confident. Too late. A servant suddenly hurried into the room. Your Grace, there is a visitor. Who? The servant hesitated. Lord Adrian. Cassian's expression immediately hardened. Evan noticed. Who is Adrian? Cassian stood. Someone you should stay away from. Evan frowned. That sounds suspicious. Cassian looked at him. It is. Before Evan could ask anything else, the doors opened. A handsome young nobleman entered the room. His eyes immediately landed on Evan. Then he smiled. So this is the Duke's mysterious husband. Evan blinked. Something about that smile made him uncomfortable. And judging by Cassian's expression, Cassian felt exactly the same way. 12 Lord Adrian smiled at Evan. I've heard quite a lot about you. Evan looked at Cassian. That's strange. I've only been here a few days. Adrian laughed. Indeed. Cassian stepped between them. Why are you here? I came to deliver a message from the palace. Adrian handed him a sealed letter. Cassian opened it and read silently. His expression darkened. Evan leaned forward. What does it say? The Emperor wants us at the palace tomorrow. Another banquet? No. Cassian folded the letter. A royal council. Evan relaxed. That sounds boring. Adrian suddenly laughed. You really don't remember anything, do you? Evan looked at him. What do you mean? Adrian's smile faded. You used to know many secrets about the royal court. Evan's heart sank. Cassian immediately turned toward Adrian. What exactly are you implying? Adrian raised his hands. Nothing. He turned toward the door. But perhaps you should ask your husband where those secrets came from. Then he left. Evan stared after him. What was that supposed to mean? Cassian didn't answer. Cassian, I don't know. Evan crossed his arms. You're lying. Cassian looked at him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Finally, Cassian said, There are things about your past that I haven't told you. Evan's eyes widened. My past? Yes. Then tell me. Cassian's expression softened. I will. He paused. But not here. Evan sighed. Why is everything in this world a secret? Cassian looked at him seriously. Because someone has been trying to kill you. Evan froze. Suddenly, the royal council didn't sound boring anymore. Evan spent the entire afternoon following Cassian around. Not because he wanted to. Because Cassian had ordered him to stay close. You're being overprotective, Evan complained. You're careless. I am not careless. You walked into a fountain yesterday. I thought it was a staircase. Cassian stopped walking. Evan looked away. That was one time. They continued toward the garden. Suddenly, a horse broke loose from a nearby stable and rushed toward them. Evan froze. Before he could move, Cassian pulled him back. Evan stumbled directly against his chest. Cassian held him firmly until the horse passed. For several seconds, neither spoke. Evan looked up. Are you okay? Cassian frowned. I'm fine. Are you? Yes. Cassian slowly released him. Evan's face felt warm. Thanks. You're welcome. A servant nearby quickly looked away. Evan noticed. Why is everyone staring? Cassian answered calmly. They're used to seeing me save you. Evan blinked. Wait. How many times has that happened? Cassian thought for a moment. 7. 7. You have fallen from a horse, slipped on stairs, nearly burned your sleeve, walked into a pond. Okay. Stop counting. Cassian's lips curved into a small smile. Evan pointed at him. You're enjoying this. Perhaps. Evan stared. The cold Duke was becoming dangerously good at smiling. And Evan was beginning to realize something even more dangerous. He was starting to like it. Part 14. The Jealous Duke. The next day, Evan visited the palace gardens. He was talking to a young nobleman named Lucien when Cassian suddenly appeared. Lucien smiled. Your husband is very lucky. Evan laughed. I don't know about that. Cassian stopped. His expression became noticeably colder. Evan. Evan turned. Oh, you're here. Cassian walked toward them. Lucien bowed politely. Your Grace. Cassian nodded. Then he looked at Evan. Come with me. Evan blinked. Why? I need to speak with you. About what? Cassian glanced at Lucien. Privately. Evan followed him. The moment they were alone, Evan crossed his arms. What was that about? Nothing. You looked angry. I wasn't. You definitely were. Cassian remained silent. Evan suddenly smiled. Wait. Cassian looked at him. Were you jealous? No. You were. I wasn't. You absolutely were. Cassian sighed. Do you enjoy annoying me? Very much. Evan laughed. Cassian looked away. Then he quietly said, I don't like other men getting too close to you. Evan's smile disappeared. Why? Cassian looked directly at him. Because you're my husband. Evan's heart began beating faster. That isn't the only reason, is it? Cassian didn't answer. But the slight blush on his ears gave him away. Evan smiled. Cassian, what? You're cute when you're jealous. Cassian immediately turned around. We're going home. Evan laughed and followed him. Wait for me. For once, the feared Duke looked completely embarrassed. Part 15, A Day Out Together. Evan decided that Cassian needed to learn how to have fun. You work too much, Evan said. I have responsibilities. You also have a husband. Cassian looked at him. Evan smiled. So today, you're coming with me. Where? You'll see. A few hours later, Cassian found himself walking through the city's busiest market. He looked completely out of place. Evan, however, was having the time of his life. He bought sweet pastries, looked at colorful decorations, and stopped at almost every shop. Cassian quietly followed him. At one stall, Evan picked up a small wooden toy. How much? The merchant gave a price. Evan reached for his money. Cassian stopped him and handed the merchant several gold coins. Evan stared. Cassian, that's way too much. It's fine. You can't just pay 10 times the price. The merchant smiled happily. Evan grabbed Cassian's sleeve. Come on. They walked away. You're terrible at shopping. I've never needed to bargain. Clearly, Evan suddenly stopped. There was a small food stall nearby. He pointed excitedly. I want that. Cassian looked at the strange snack. What is it? I don't know. You want something you don't know? Yes. Cassian sighed. Fine. Evan took one bite. His eyes widened. This is amazing. He offered some to Cassian. Cassian hesitated. Try it. After a moment, Cassian took a bite. Evan watched him carefully. Well, Cassian nodded. Good. Evan smiled. They continued walking together. For the first time since arriving in this world, Evan forgot that he didn't belong there. He wasn't thinking about the novel. He wasn't thinking about going home. He was simply enjoying the day with Cassian. And somewhere along the way, Evan realized something. He no longer hated being married to the cold Duke. Part 16, The Confession. That evening, Evan and Cassian returned to the estate. Evan was still smiling from their day in the city. You know, he said, you're actually fun when you aren't pretending to be terrifying. Cassian raised an eyebrow. Pretending? Yes. I don't pretend. You do. Cassian shook his head. Evan laughed. They reached the garden and sat beneath a large tree. For a while, neither spoke. Then Cassian quietly said, Evan, do you still want a divorce? Evan froze. He had expected the question eventually. At the beginning, the answer would have been easy. Yes. He wanted to go home. But now, he wasn't so sure. Evan looked down at his hands. I don't know. Cassian's expression remained calm, but his eyes changed. You don't have to decide now. Evan looked at him. You really would let me leave? Yes. Even though I'm your husband? Cassian nodded. If staying makes you unhappy, I won't force you. Evan was quiet. That was the moment he understood. Cassian wasn't holding him because of their marriage. He genuinely cared about him. Evan smiled softly. I think I like you. Cassian went completely still. What? Evan's face turned red. I said I think I like you. Cassian stared at him. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. I know. Evan's eyes widened. You knew? You've been following me around for days. That doesn't mean anything. Cassian laughed quietly. Evan covered his face. This is embarrassing. Cassian gently moved Evan's hands away. You don't need to be embarrassed. Evan looked at him. For the first time, neither of them tried to hide what they felt. And Evan finally understood that perhaps this strange world wasn't a place he needed to escape from anymore. Part 17, The Royal Council. The next morning, Evan and Cassian returned to the palace. Evan was nervous. Not because of the Royal Council. Because Cassian had been smiling at him all morning. Why do you keep looking at me? Evan asked. Because I can. That is a terrible answer. Cassian's lips curved. Evan looked away, trying not to smile. Inside the council chamber, the emperor and several nobles were already waiting. The emperor looked at Evan. You seem much happier than before. Evan nodded. I am. Cassian glanced at him. Evan quickly added, mostly because I'm getting better food. A few nobles laughed. Even the emperor smiled. The meeting began. The discussion was about taxes and trade, and Evan quickly became bored. Then one minister mentioned that merchants were losing money because goods were taking too long to reach the capital. Evan suddenly remembered something from his modern world. Why don't you create fixed trade routes? Everyone stared at him. Evan continued. Instead of every merchant choosing a different road, organize official routes and resting stations. It would make travel safer and faster. The room became silent. One minister frowned. And how would that help? It would reduce delays. You could also record how much each merchant carries, so taxes are easier to calculate. The emperor looked impressed. Cassian simply watched Evan with a small smile. The discussion continued. By the end of the meeting, several nobles were taking notes. Evan leaned toward Cassian. I was just trying to make the meeting less boring. Cassian whispered. You may have accidentally improved the entire trade system. Evan blinked. Seriously? Yes. Evan smiled proudly. Maybe I should charge the palace consulting fees. Cassian looked at him. I'll pay. Evan's smile faded. Wait, you mean that? Of course. Evan laughed. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving in this ancient world. He was beginning to. Part 18, The Choice. A few weeks passed. Evan's life had changed completely. He had learned how to dress properly, stopped getting lost in the palace, and even learned which spoon to use at dinner. Mostly. One evening, he found Cassian sitting alone in the garden. Evan sat beside him, thinking, yes. About what? You. Evan blinked. Me? Cassian nodded. You said you wanted to return to your world. Evan became quiet. He had almost forgotten about that. A strange feeling filled his chest. Cassian continued. I found an old scholar who may know how to send you back. Evan stared at him. You did? Yes. There was no happiness in Cassian's voice. Evan understood why. If I go back, Evan whispered, I'll leave you. Cassian looked at him. I know. And you're still helping me? Yes. Why? Cassian was silent for a moment. Because I love you. Evan's eyes widened. Cassian rarely showed his emotions. But now there was no hesitation in his voice. I don't want you to leave, Cassian continued. But I won't make that choice for you. Evan looked down. He thought about his old life. His room. His university. His friends. Everything he had known. Then he looked at Cassian. The man who had protected him, listened to him, laughed with him, and somehow become his home. Evan smiled through his tears. I don't want to go back. Cassian's eyes softened. Are you certain? Evan nodded. Yes. He took Cassian's hand. I think I already found where I belong. For the first time, Cassian pulled him into a warm embrace. Evan smiled. The ancient world had once felt like a mistake. Now it felt like home. Part 19, The Last Problem. Evan thought everything would become peaceful after choosing to stay. He was wrong. The next morning, a royal messenger arrived. His Majesty requests the presence of Duke Valen immediately. Cassian frowned. Evan looked at the messenger. Is something wrong? The messenger hesitated. Someone has accused His Grace of stealing royal documents. Evan's eyes widened. What? Cassian remained calm. Who made the accusation? The royal minister. Evan immediately remembered the minister from the council. The same man who had looked annoyed when Evan suggested improving the trade routes. Evan turned to Cassian. He's lying. Cassian looked at him. How do you know? Because he looks like the kind of person who would do that. Cassian almost smiled. That's not evidence. I know, but I'm working on it. At the palace, the minister presented several documents as proof. The emperor looked serious. Duke Valen, what do you say? I didn't take them. The minister stepped forward. The documents were found in the duke's study. Evan suddenly noticed something. The seal on one document looked strange. He picked it up. Wait. Everyone turned toward him. This seal is wrong. The minister's face changed. Evan pointed at it. The royal seal should have 4 marks around the edge. This one has only 3. The emperor immediately examined it. His expression darkened. This is a forgery. The minister stepped backward. Evan smiled. Oops. Cassian looked at him. You just saved me. Evan shrugged. That's what husbands are for. The emperor ordered the minister to be arrested. As they left the palace, Cassian looked at Evan. You were incredible. Evan smiled. I know. Then he whispered. But I'm still expecting dinner. Cassian laughed. The final obstacle was gone. And for the first time, their future was completely theirs to choose. Part 20. The Wedding They Never Had. A month later, the Duke's estate was covered in flowers. Evan stared at the decorations. What is happening? Cassian stood beside him. A wedding. Evan blinked. But we're already married. I know. Then why another wedding? Cassian looked at him. Our first marriage happened because of circumstances you don't remember. He paused. This time, I want you to choose me. Evan's heart melted. You're asking me properly? Yes. Evan smiled. Then my answer is yes. The ceremony was small. Only their closest friends and family attended. When Evan walked toward Cassian, The Duke's usual cold expression disappeared. He looked genuinely happy. After the ceremony, everyone gathered for dinner. Evan noticed something immediately. There were far too many dishes. He looked at Cassian. You did this on purpose. Cassian calmly drank his tea. I wanted to make sure you had enough choices. I only need 3. You usually eat 5. That's different. Cassian smiled. Later that evening, they stood together beneath the lights in the garden. Evan looked at his husband. Do you remember when I asked for a divorce? Yes. I can't believe I said that. I can. Evan laughed. You're never letting me forget it, are you? No. Evan shook his head. You're annoying. And yet you married me twice. Evan smiled. Fair point. He leaned against Cassian's shoulder. The life Evan had once considered impossible had become his favorite one. No more running. No more wondering where he belonged. Just him and Cassian. Together. Part 21. 6 months later. 6 months later, life at the Duke's estate had become strangely peaceful. Cassian was still feared throughout the empire. Evan was still causing chaos everywhere he went. Together, they were somehow the perfect disaster. One morning, Evan entered Cassian's study carrying a large stack of papers. Cassian looked up. What happened? I have an idea. Cassian immediately put down his pen. That sentence usually means trouble. Evan ignored him. I want to open a cafe in the capital. A cafe? Yes. Modern-style desserts, coffee, pastries. Cassian stared at him. You want to sell food? I want to become rich. You already have my fortune. Evan crossed his arms. I want my own. Cassian thought for a moment. Fine. Evan's eyes widened. Really? Yes. You didn't even ask how much money I need. I trust you. Evan smiled. That evening, they began planning. Within a few weeks, Evan's little cafe became the most popular place in the capital. People loved his strange new desserts and sweet drinks. Even nobles began visiting. One afternoon, Cassian entered the cafe. Evan looked up. You're here early. I finished my work. And I wanted to see you. Evan smiled. The customers nearby immediately began whispering. The terrifying Duke had come all the way across the city just to see his husband. Evan leaned closer. People are staring. Cassian calmly replied. Let them. Evan laughed. He never imagined that his accidental journey into an ancient world would become his happiest chapter. And he certainly never expected the cold Duke to become the softest person in his life. Part 22. The happiest ending. 1 year after Evan arrived in the ancient world, he stood outside the little cafe he had built with Cassian. The streets were busy. Children laughed. Customers filled the tables. And above the entrance was a simple wooden sign. Evan smiled proudly. I can't believe this actually worked. Cassian stood beside him. I told you it would. You also thought my coffee was terrible. It was. Evan gasped. Excuse me. Cassian smiled. It improved. You're lucky you're handsome. I know. Evan stared at him. Did you just compliment yourself? Cassian calmly walked inside. Evan followed, laughing. That evening, they returned home together. Evan looked around the beautiful estate that had once frightened him. He remembered the first morning, the strange bedroom, the ancient clothes, the terrifying Duke standing at the door, and the words that had nearly made him faint. Your husband. Evan laughed. What? Cassian asked. I was just remembering how much I wanted a divorce. Cassian raised an eyebrow. And now? Evan smiled. Now I can't imagine my life without you. Cassian took his hand. Good. Evan leaned against him. I guess accidentally marrying you was the best accident of my life. Cassian kissed his forehead gently. And I would choose you again. Evan smiled. He had arrived in this world by accident. He had expected to escape. Instead, he found a home, a family, and the man he loved. The feared Duke never became the villain everyone expected. And Evan never returned to his old world. Because sometimes, the strangest accidents lead you exactly where you were meant to be. The end.